252 million years ago, Earth was a single, vast continent. A stable kingdom ruled by bizarre, saber-toothed predators. These were the undisputed masters of their domain. Then, the world cracked open. The greatest extinction event in history began. An event that would extinguish over 90% of all life. In the midst of that fire and fog, the reigning kings would fall. But a new kind of killer, an inheritor, was watching from the shadows. This was the close of the Permian period. A time before the dinosaurs. The planet was ruled by a different group of titans, the Therapsids. These were the synapsids. Creatures often called mammal-like reptiles. But they were truly our own distant, ancient ancestors. And at the very top of this global food web, stood a killer unlike any seen since. The gorgonopsid. Creatures like Inostrancevia, the size of a modern grizzly bear. They possessed sprawling legs, but a powerfully built skull. And most terrifying of all, a pair of enormous, saber-like canine teeth. These were the first great saber-toothed predators on Earth. They were fast, efficient, and likely warm-blooded. They hunted the large, lumbering herbivores of the Permian plains. For millions of years, their reign seemed absolute. The ecosystem was complex, stable, and thriving. And breathtaking. But this stability was balanced on the edge of a knife. Deep beneath the continent, in what is now Siberia. A geological catastrophe was waiting to begin. The tension that had been building finally snapped. This was the eruption of the Siberian Traps. It was not a single volcano, like Vesuvius or St. Helens. It was an entire geological province, larger than Western Europe, splitting open and flooding the world with magma. For nearly 1 million years, catastrophic floods of basalt lava poured across the land, covering millions of square kilometers. But the lava, as devastating as it was, was not the true killer. The real weapon was invisible. As this ocean of magma surged upward, it burned through one of the largest coal basins on the planet. It vaporized incomprehensible volumes of carbon-rich rock. The result was the single greatest injection of greenhouse gases in Earth's history. Billions, perhaps trillions of tons of carbon dioxide and methane were released in a geological instant. The atmosphere ignited. A runaway greenhouse effect took hold. Global temperatures soared by 10, perhaps 15 degrees Celsius. The world's climate spun into total violent chaos. The stable kingdom of the gorgonopsids was set on fire. The disaster didn't stop in the sky. It cascaded into the oceans. The seas began to die. As gigatons of CO2 dissolved into the water. The oceans became corrosive. This is ocean acidification. Countless marine creatures, from plankton to reef builders, simply dissolved. But the heat triggered an even greater horror. As the waters warmed, they could no longer hold dissolved oxygen. The ocean suffocated, creating vast, expanding dead zones. In the depths of this anoxic soup, a different kind of life thrived. Specialized bacteria that consumed sulfur and released. Plumes of highly toxic hydrogen sulfide gas. This poison, scientists believe, bubbled up from the dead oceans. It poisoned the air and helped destroy the ozone layer. On land, the very rain was a weapon. Volcanic sulfur dioxide mixed with atmospheric water creating acid rain. It fell for centuries, scorching the forests. The complex food web, which had supported the Gorgonopsid kings, was severed at its root. The herbivores starved, and the great predators starved with them. The gorgonopsids, specialized for power and speed, were liabilities in a world that demanded only endurance. their warm-blooded, high-octane metabolism. Which had made them apex hunters. Now demanded food and oxygen that no longer existed. It was a planetary execution. 95% of all species in the ocean vanished. 70% of all life on land was wiped out. The Great Dying was the closest life on Earth has ever come to a total reset. The thrones of the apex predators, held for millions of years, were now empty. The world was a silent, toxic wasteland. A ghost planet, choked with ash. But in the poisoned rivers, something was still moving. The world after the fire was a vacuum. A planet scrubbed clean of its complexity. The great forests were gone, replaced, scientists believe, by vast carpets of fungus. The air was still thick with carbon dioxide and dangerously low on oxygen. This was the dawn of the Triassic, a hostile, superheated disaster world. Life on land was scarce. The great synapsid empires, our own distant relatives. Only the hardiest, the most generalized, and perhaps the luckiest clung to life. But the rivers and lakes, though toxic and anoxic by our standards, offered a slim refuge. And it was here that the Inheritor made its move. Proterosuchus. Its name means early crocodile. And while it was not a direct ancestor of modern crocodilians, it had independently evolved their winning blueprint. It was a semi-aquatic ambush predator. It was large for its time, growing up to 10 feet long. It possessed a long snout, full of sharp, conical teeth, and legs that splayed out to the side in a classic reptilian sprawl. But Proterosuchus was not a therapsid, like the fallen Gorgonopsid kings. It was something new. It was an archosaur, the vanguard of a dynasty that would soon conquer the planet. So, what was its secret? What was its specific survival toolkit? its lifestyle. While the land was a baked, oxygen-starved desert, Proterosuchus spent most of its time in the water. These waterways likely acted as a crucial thermal buffer, allowing it to escape the scorching, greenhouse gas-laden atmosphere. This aquatic life also gave it access to the only reliable food source. The land-based food web was gone. But the rivers were likely choked with other desperate survivors. Fish, amphibians, and even other struggling reptiles. Proterosuchus didn't need a complex ecosystem. It just needed a disaster menu. But its greatest advantage was metabolic. Its cold blood, unlike the high-energy, warm-blooded gorgonopsids, Proterosuchus was almost certainly an ectotherm. It didn't need to eat constantly to fuel an internal furnace. It could simply wait, absorbing the brutal heat of the Triassic sun to gain energy, and then retreating to the water to hunt. In a low-oxygen, low-food world, a low metabolism was the ultimate superpower. It could tolerate the toxic air, it could survive for long stretches between meals. While the last of the mammal-like predators gasped for air and starved, Proterosuchus was perfectly adapted to thrive in the apocalypse. It was the right creature in the right place. At the absolute worst time in the history of life on Earth, the Great Dying was over. The world was an empty canvas, waiting for a new master. Proterosuchus did not just survive the apocalypse, it inherited the planet. In the millions of years following the extinction, as life slowly, painfully began to reclaim the land, this early crocodile was the undisputed apex predator. Its fossils have been found almost everywhere. This reveals it was one of the first truly global land-based predators. It was a rugged generalist in a world that punished specialization. It was a dynasty builder. It was an archosaur. This was the trunk of a brand new evolutionary tree. Proterosuchus and its close relatives established a foothold that the shattered mammal-like therapsids could never again reclaim. Our own ancestors were reduced to small, burrowing, nocturnal creatures. They would live in the shadows for the next 150 million years. The Permian belonged to the synapsids, but the Triassic would belong to the archosaurs. This new lineage exploded in diversity. They seized every empty niche the extinction had created. From the lineage of Proterosuchus and its kin would arise the great ruling reptiles. The first pterosaurs would soon take to the skies. The ancestors of crocodiles would perfect the semi-aquatic ambush. And, most importantly, a new, upright, fast-moving predator would emerge: the dinosaurs. The fall of the gorgonopsid was a tragedy. But in the logic of deep time, one dynasty's extinction is another's opportunity. Proterosuchus was the bridge. The tough, gritty, resilient survivor that carried the torch of the apex predator through the darkest night the world has ever known, and delivered it into the dawn of a new age. If you would like to join us on our next expedition into Earth's darkest hours in search of the light of life, consider joining our Researchers Guild by subscribing to the channel. And let us know in the comments, if you could witness any moment from the Permian-Triassic extinction, would it be the eruption of the Siberian Traps or the silent fungal world that came after?